Get out of this seat immediately. You're making the other passengers uncomfortable. The sharp, authoritative command rang out across the hushed first-class cabin of Mesa Airlines Flight 227, brooking no argument. The rigid tone echoed off the cabin's luxurious, pristine panels. The voice belonged to Catherine Ward, the flight's lead attendant. She stood at the second row, tall, hair pulled into a flawless bun, uniform navy and crisply pressed. Her small, gleaming badge a testament to her absolute authority in this part of the plane. Her eyes, sharp with suspicion, fixed on one lone passenger, a petite black girl of about 11. This was Maya Johnson, seated quietly in 2A. Maya hadn't made a sound or caused any disturbance. She simply sat up straight, hands folded gently in her lap, her calm gaze drifting to the window as though savoring the moment before takeoff. Maya didn't understand why she'd suddenly become the center of attention. This wasn't her first time in first class. Her mother, Rebecca Johnson, a well-known CEO, often traveled across the country. Today, however, Maya was flying solo. Rebecca had meticulously booked the ticket weeks ago, secured full confirmation, and even called Mesa's VIP desk to ensure everything would go smoothly. And yet, here she was, confronted by an adult whose cold glare and unyielding demeanor left no room for courtesy. Maya turned her head slightly and met Catherine's stare with composed confidence, her eyes bright and steady. "I don't understand. I haven't done anything wrong," Maya said softly, but firmly. Catherine Ward offered a dismissive half-smile that didn't reach her icy eyes. "Sweetheart, this is first class. You must be in the wrong seat. Let me show you where you belong." Unfazed, Maya reached into her jacket pocket, unfolded her boarding pass, and held it out. "Here's my ticket. Flight 227, Seat 2A. You can check it if you'd like." Catherine didn't even glance at the pass. Her imperious gaze remained fixed on Maya. "I don't need to check. Unaccompanied minors aren't allowed in first class. You must move to economy right now." Her voice carried across the cabin, drawing curious glances from other passengers. Maya stayed perfectly still, her resolve unwavering. "My mother called ahead to confirm everything," Maya replied clearly, maintaining a polite tone. "I have all the paperwork, and the airline approved it. You can verify with your supervisor." Maya's calm confidence seemed to throw Catherine for a moment, but she quickly straightened her posture and spoke even more sharply. "Do not argue with me, child. Pack your things and follow me to the back, or I'll have someone escort you." The air around Seat 2A grew heavy. Maya knew every passenger was watching. She didn't want a scene, but she refused to submit to this blatant unfairness. A middle-aged woman in 2C, Linda Rivera, leaned forward. "Excuse me, ma'am. Why are you forcing this girl to move? She hasn't disturbed anyone." Catherine shot a cold glance at Mrs. Rivera, then turned away, ignoring her. Her icy glare fixed once more on Maya. "I won't repeat myself. Stand up now, or I'll bring someone to remove you." Maya inhaled deeply. Her heart raced, but her posture never wavered. Hands still gently resting on her knees, she met Catherine's stare. "I'm sorry, but I'm not moving. This is my seat." Furious, Catherine Ward pivoted on her heel and strode toward the cockpit, determined to summon the co-pilot, Jason Mitchell. Maya returned her gaze to the window. Her pulse thumped, but her face remained composed. Outside, the sky was a flawless blue, as if oblivious to the storm brewing inside. She whispered to herself, "Just hold on for a few more minutes." Unbeknownst to her, this confrontation was only the beginning of a dramatic chain of events that would change the course of this flight. Outside the window, the last luggage cart was rolling away from the aircraft's belly, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. Maya Johnson kept her gaze fixed on the sky, recalling her mother's words whenever she felt anxious. We never bow before injustice, not even a little. Now, those words echoed in Maya's mind more clearly than ever. Footsteps pounded on the cabin floor again. Catherine Ward was back, and this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a tall man in his early 30s, exuding as much cold authority as she did. It was Jason Mitchell, the flight's co-pilot. Jason stood rigidly next to Catherine, his stern eyes narrowing at Maya as if she were a problem to be dispatched, not an innocent child. "Young lady, this is not the time for debate," Jason said in a chilling tone, his voice carrying clearly to the nearby passengers. "We need you to move to your reassigned seat so we can depart on time." Maya took a steadying breath and faced him. Her eyes remained clear, free of anger or fear. "I already told Ms. Ward," Maya replied calmly. "My mother, Rebecca Johnson, reserved this first-class seat through VIP services. I'm fully authorized to sit here." Each word came out measured and unshakable, stating an undeniable fact. Jason squinted, folding his arms as he cast Maya a quick look of veiled contempt. He leaned slightly toward Catherine and spoke under his breath, yet still loud enough to be heard. "Have you verified her booking?" Catherine didn't look at him. She merely curled her lips in a frosty half-smile. "I know exactly what I'm doing. Airline policy forbids unaccompanied minors in this cabin. I won't waste any more time on this." Jason nodded and turned back to Maya. "Listen, if your mother really arranged this carefully, she understands that safety and regulations come first. We have every right to ask you to leave this seat." His tone carried no warmth. Maya stayed perfectly still, hands resting lightly on her knees, back as straight as ever. "Why don't you contact your supervisor to confirm?" she asked softly, her logic clear and composed. Jason's eyebrow lifted in surprise at the unwavering poise of an 11-year-old. He bristled at the challenge, but refused to give ground in front of the watching cabin. "We don't need instructions from a child on how to do our job. You have two choices. Move now, or I'll call security to escort you out. Which will it be?" The tension drew curious glances and hushed whispers around them. Some passengers averted their eyes, not wanting to get involved. At that moment, a Latina woman in 2C, Mrs. Linda Rivera, could no longer remain silent. Leaning toward Jason, she spoke with measured firmness. "Excuse me, but she hasn't done anything wrong. I saw her ticket clearly. Seat 2A. Why force her to move?" Jason flinched, glancing at Mrs. Rivera with annoyance. Catherine only gave a single, piercing look before turning away as if she hadn't heard a word. "Ma'am, we're enforcing safety rules. Please return to your seat and let us handle this," Jason replied, his tone designed to shut down further argument. Mrs. Rivera shook her head helplessly, sympathy and frustration in her eyes as she sat back down. She felt deeply for Maya, but didn't know what more she could do. Encouraged by Jason's firmness, Catherine took another step forward. "You heard me. Stand up now." But Maya did not move. She lifted her chin, pride shining in her eyes, her spine straighter than ever. In her heart, her mother's words resonated. "We never bow before injustice." In a voice both soft and powerful, Maya offered her final reply. "I'm sorry, but I will not leave this seat. It's mine. I'm sure my mother will explain everything to you if something's unclear." Jason and Catherine stood frozen, anger and surprise etched on their faces at the girl's unwavering resolve. The cabin's tension hit its peak. Just then, Maya's phone vibrated lightly in her hand. She glanced down and read the brief message on the screen. "Mom is on her way." Hold your ground." Maya exhaled slowly, a surge of new strength filling her. She knew this confrontation was only the beginning. The brief text from her mother still held a comforting warmth in Maya's small hand, until Jason Mitchell leaned in closer, his authoritative, icy gaze fixed on her. His voice dropped to a near whisper, heavy as a stone pressing on her mind. "If you don't come down on your own, I'll have to call security to handle this." Maya's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing with pressure. She knew that arguing further wouldn't help. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Her legs trembled, but her posture remained proud and resolute. She cast a glance around the cabin, feeling the tension, the curious and uneasy stares from the other passengers. "I'll go," Maya said softly, her voice calm yet unwavering. "But not because I'm wrong, because my mother taught me to show respect, even when it's not returned." Her small voice carried clearly through the hush of first class. Jason's eyes flickered with surprise, then hardened, his annoyance plain on his face. Catherine, by contrast, allowed herself a satisfied smirk, her cold stare declaring victory. Maya picked up her little backpack, neatly embroidered with her name, and carefully left seat 2A. Each step felt leaden, as if she were trudging down an endless path. Invisible needles of scrutiny pricked at her pride, yet she pressed on toward her reassigned seat near the emergency exit. As she passed the third row, her eyes met Mrs. Linda Rivera's. The middle-aged woman's deep brown eyes brimmed with empathy and regret. She gave Maya a small encouraging nod, an ember of warmth that bolstered Maya's resolve. Settling into her new seat, Maya immediately dialed her mother. The phone rang twice before her mother's familiar, gentle yet firm voice answered, "Maya, I'm on my way. Are you okay?" Maya inhaled deeply, striving for calm. "I'm fine, Mom. I tried to explain, but they still made me move. I did the right thing, didn't I?" "You did," her mother replied decisively. "I'm so proud of you for standing your ground. Don't worry. I'll be there any minute." Maya hung up and leaned back against the cold seat back, a slight ease washing over her. But as she closed her eyes for a moment, a bitter memory from exactly 1 year ago flooded back in vivid detail. Back then, Maya and her mother, Rebecca Johnson, were flying from Chicago to New York for an important business trip, and it was Maya's first time in first class. They'd both been excited, dressed in their best outfits, smiling as they entered the cabin. Their joy was short-lived. A tall, blonde flight attendant had stopped them, her eyes narrowing suspiciously as she addressed Maya's mother in a polite but doubtful tone. "Excuse me, are you sure this is your seat?" Maya's mother, strong and accomplished, the most formidable woman Maya had ever known, had calmly produced her boarding pass and shown it without hesitation. Yet the attendant insisted on checking multiple times, even summoning a colleague to verify. The sting of humiliation, having to prove a rightful entitlement, etched itself deeply into Maya's memory. When the plane finally took off, her mother quietly squeezed her hand and said in a resolute, heartfelt whisper, "Never forget this feeling, Maya. We can't control how others see us, but we can control how we respond. Always keep your head high and your dignity intact, no matter what." Those words had carved themselves into Maya's heart forever. Now, alone in the cramped seat at the back of the plane, she vowed this time would be different. She would not cry, bow her head, or avert her gaze. She would confront injustice with courage and grace, just as her mother had taught her. From the front of the cabin, Catherine's soft laugh drifted back like a reminder of the unfairness Maya had endured. Catherine still stood by the first-class entrance, her face alight with self-satisfaction. Maya understood that this woman wasn't merely doing her job. She was reveling in her power, in controlling others. That outrage fueled Maya's determination. She sat tall, hands gripping the seat belt, eyes fixed forward, calmly awaiting her mother's arrival. This time, she would never let prejudice wound her or her mother again. In a quiet whisper to herself, Maya vowed, "I remember what you taught me, Mom. This time will be different. We never back down from injustice." Outside the window, the sky had turned a steely gray, heavy clouds signaling that the greatest confrontation still lay ahead. But now, Maya was ready. Outside the airplane window, the ash, gray sky grew ever thicker, clouds sagging low and obscuring the last light of the late afternoon. Maya sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed straight ahead, her resolve unshaken. Yet, deep inside, her small heart battled to remain calm amid the curious, pitying stares of the passengers around her. At that moment, decisive footsteps echoed from the front of the aisle. It was Tamika Jones, the ground staff member responsible for document checks at the boarding gate. Tamika's face tensed as she scanned each row of seats, urgently searching for someone. Her eyes locked on Maya, seated by the emergency exit at the back of the cabin. Surprise swiftly gave way to anxious worry on Tamika's face. Tamika knew exactly who Maya was. She had personally verified Maya's paperwork before boarding, remembering clearly the little girl's polite, composed demeanor, and the bold 2A First Class printed on the special ticket confirmed by Mesa Airlines' VIP desk. "This can't be happening," Tamika thought, a knot of unease forming in her chest. She glanced toward the first-class cabin, where Catherine and Jason still stood, whispering to each other with unsettling satisfaction. The more Tamika looked, the more she sensed something terribly wrong. Wasting no time, Tamika pulled her small phone from her uniform pocket. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the emergency VIP line. When someone picked up, Tamika inhaled deeply, forcing her voice to stay calm and professional. "VIP services, this is Tamika Jones at Gate 32. We have a serious issue on Flight 227. A young passenger, Maya Johnson, was forced out of her first-class seat without any valid reason. I personally verified her ticket, and everything is correct and legitimate. This is a grave misunderstanding that needs immediate resolution before it escalates." The voice on the other end grew suddenly tense. "Are you certain, Tamika?" "Maya Johnson is a special VIP. She's the daughter of Rebecca Johnson, CEO of Johnson Aerotech." Tamika's reply left no room for doubt. "I am 100% certain. I scanned and verified her ticket myself before she boarded. First class, seat 2A. Everything was perfectly in order. Yet now she's been moved to a seat by the exit row against her will." On the VIP services end, the manager's tone shifted from surprise to concern, edged with alarm. "Understood, Tamika. Thank you for reporting this immediately. Do not leave the aircraft and keep your phone on. I'll notify senior leadership right away and take care of it." Tamika hung up, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never before encountered anything like this in her airport career. Mesa prided itself on professional, fair service, especially for VIP clients like the Johnsons. This incident threatened not only to hurt Maya but to damage the entire airline's reputation. Meanwhile, Catherine Ward in first class shot a probing glance at Tamika. She immediately sensed something was amiss when she saw the young agent making an anxious call. Catherine whispered something to Jason, her face darkening into a scowl. Jason Mitchell narrowed his eyes at Tamika, annoyance flickering across his features. He stepped forward, his voice stern as if reprimanding a subordinate. Tamika, what's going on here? Tamika startled but met his icy stare with determination. She had resolved that the truth mattered more than any intimidation. Mr. Mitchell, I just confirmed with VIP services. Maya Johnson is fully authorized to sit in first class. Forcing her out of her seat is unjust. Jason stiffened, his eyes flashing with anger and unease, but he quickly masked it with a disdainful smile. I suggest you focus on your duties at the gate rather than meddling in matters beyond your responsibility, Tamika. Tamika stood her ground, unbowed by his condescension. Protecting our passengers' rights is my top duty, Mr. Mitchell, she replied firmly. Jason pressed his lips shut and turned away to whisper something to Catherine. They moved out of the passenger's view. Tamika exhaled, relief mingling with tension. She knew she had done the right thing, but also that the fight was far from over. A storm was brewing. In just minutes, Maya's powerful CEO mother would arrive, and then Catherine and Jason would no longer be in control of this situation. Tamika glanced at Maya once more and thought, hold on just a little longer, sweetie. Justice is coming. The cabin felt as still as a lake before a storm. Catherine Ward and Jason Mitchell lingered in the shadowy corner by the cabin door, deliberately avoiding the passengers' curious stares. Catherine kept casting triumphant glances at Maya, while Jason's brow furrowed, as if sensing something was very wrong, his eyes flicking now and then toward the entrance where something unusual seemed to be unfolding. Just as the clock ticked 5 minutes past Tamika's emergency call, a tall woman appeared at the aircraft door, shattering the tense silence. She was dressed simply but carried an unmistakable air of authority. Jet, black hair neatly pinned up, eyes sharp and commanding. Immediately, every passenger turned to look. It was none other than Rebecca Johnson, the famed CEO of Johnson Aerotech. Her stride was confident and decisive, each step radiating the poise of someone accustomed to leading the most important meetings. Behind her, 2 senior Mesa Airlines executives followed, their faces etched with concern as they tried to maintain respectful composure. Rebecca's arrival visibly unsettled Catherine and Jason. They straightened at once, their faces paling. Jason's eyes went wide with shock and anxiety, while Catherine's earlier smugness vanished and she quickly averted her gaze from Rebecca's formidable stare. Tamika, standing by the entrance, allowed herself a small, relieved smile. She knew she had done the right thing at the critical moment. As Rebecca approached, Tamika gave a respectful nod, which Rebecca returned. Then her gaze immediately locked onto Maya's seat by the emergency exit. Seeing her daughter there, a surge of emotion swelled in Rebecca's chest. Yet she held herself in perfect calm, her eyes now fixed on Catherine and Jason. Miss Ward, Mr. Mitchell, Rebecca began, her voice gentle but commanding, each word sharp and clear. Can you explain exactly what has been happening here? Jason opened his mouth but fell silent, confusion and guilt registering on his face. Catherine jumped in with a forced smile. Ms. Johnson, this is just a small misunderstanding. We were merely following airline safety regulations. Rebecca raised a hand to halt her, polite yet firm. Catherine immediately fell silent, her eyes dropping. A misunderstanding, Ms. Ward, Rebecca repeated quietly, but with unmistakable weight. My daughter was forced out of the first-class seat your airline confirmed for her. You call that a small misunderstanding? I expect a far better explanation. Her words rang through the cabin, and every passenger sat in rapt silence, drawn to the power in her presence. Catherine tried to steady her voice, but it trembled. We only wanted to ensure the safety of all passengers. Company policy— Rebecca cut her off, her tone now cold and resolute, each word a clear warning. I know your policy, Miss Ward. I also know that Maya fully complied with it. I demand a genuine reason why you treated my daughter this way. Right now, Jason stammered, voice shaking. We were simply following the lead attendant's assessment of the situation. Rebecca turned to him, fury blazing in her eyes, though her tone remained measured. Assessment based on what, Mr. Mitchell? Her age? Or the color of her skin? Jason went speechless. Catherine stood frozen, face ashen, lips pressed tight. The tension peaked as every passenger leaned forward, waiting for their response. Rebecca inhaled deeply, then addressed Tamika with slightly softened authority. Tamika, thank you for alerting me so quickly. Would you please confirm in front of everyone exactly what Maya's ticket says? Tamika stepped forward, voice clear and confident. I personally checked Maya Johnson's ticket, first class, seat 2A. Everything was in perfect order, ma'am. Rebecca nodded, then turned back to Catherine and Jason one last time. Her voice rang out with finality. I expect a public apology from both of you to my daughter. Immediately. At that, the entire cabin fell into breathless silence. No one dared move or speak as all eyes fixed on Catherine and Jason, waiting for their final answer. The moment Rebecca finished speaking, the cabin seemed to freeze in mid-air. Every eye was on Catherine and Jason, waiting for their response. The tension tightened like a slender cord, each second threatening to snap it entirely. Catherine drew a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. She smoothed the navy scarf at her neck, as if reclaiming the last shred of authority she could grasp. Her voice trembled, but she fought to remain minimally professional. Miss Johnson, our airline always puts passenger safety first. Mesa Airlines' policy is that unaccompanied minors should not be seated in first class to avoid inconveniencing other customers. Rebecca lifted a single brow to cut her off, her tone calm but laced with unmistakable firmness. How strange, she said. I've flown with Mesa Airlines for years and have never heard of such a rule forbidding minors from first class. Even stranger that it only applies to my daughter today. Rebecca's voice was gentle but razor, sharp, her gaze piercing as though it could see straight into Catherine's conscience. Catherine swallowed hard, the weight of this powerful woman's scrutiny crushing her. Yet she clung to her last excuse, stubbornly insisting, Miss Johnson, with all due respect, we were simply following company procedure. There was absolutely no personal ill will toward your daughter. Rebecca took a single step forward, closing the distance until it felt as though she owned the entire conversation. Her voice was soft yet unyielding. If you truly meant no harm, then why did you refuse at the outset to even check Maya's ticket? Why didn't you verify with your superiors? All of those actions prove that this wasn't about policy. It was your own personal bias, Ms. Ward. Catherine's face went pale. Her lips quivered, but no words came. For the first time in her life, she felt every one of her carefully constructed defenses crumble. Rebecca's words held up a mirror to the ugly truth of prejudice and arrogance Catherine had long hidden. Jason Mitchell stepped in, sensing the crisis, and adopted a falsely soothing tone. Ms. Johnson, I believe this is simply a regrettable misunderstanding. Catherine was only trying to do her job. I'm sure she never intended any offense or discrimination. Rebecca turned on him instantly, her eyes ice cold and silencing him in mid-sentence. Each syllable she spoke carried weight. Mr. Mitchell, your words are precisely the problem. When Catherine deliberately ignored clear evidence, refused to verify facts, and forcibly removed my daughter from her rightful seat, and you stood by her instead of seeking the truth, that is complicity in prejudice, whether you intended it or not. She paused just long enough for the words to land like stones. Her gaze was deeper and more unyielding than ever, her tone even firmer. Prejudice isn't only in overt discrimination. It hides in silence, in baseless excuses, and in the willful avoidance of responsibility. Jason bowed his head, throat tight, unable to meet Rebecca's gaze. He realized he had become part of the injustice he'd always denied. A heavy, unprecedented silence gripped the cabin. No passenger dared to breathe loudly or shift in their seat. All eyes remained riveted on Rebecca, standing center cabin with calm authority. The tension was stretched taut, nearly unbearable. Rebecca turned gently to Maya, her voice softening with pride and affection. "Maya, you did exactly what I taught you. Today, you stood not only for yourself, but for everyone who's ever faced injustice." Maya's eyes shone with emotion. She inhaled deeply, squared her shoulders, and her pride swelled. Rebecca then fixed her gaze on Catherine and Jason one last time, her voice resolute and unrelenting. "This is no longer only about us. This is about fairness, ethics, and professional responsibility. I expect both of you to fully answer for what happened to my daughter, and to do so right here, in front of everyone on this flight." The cabin's tension peaked. Catherine and Jason stood motionless, trapped by the unblinking judgment of every passenger. They understood that no excuse or apology could undo what had been revealed. The curtain of prejudice had been pulled back, exposing an uncomfortable truth they could no longer conceal. The moment Rebecca's words ended, the cabin fell into a frozen hush, every eye fixed on Catherine and Jason, awaiting their response. The tension tightened like an invisible noose, each passing second threatening to snap. Catherine drew a trembling breath, striving to regain her composure. She adjusted the navy scarf at her throat, as though summoning the last vestige of her authority. Her voice quavered, but she forced a veneer of professionalism. "Miss Johnson, our airline always places passenger safety above all else. Mesa Airlines policy holds that unaccompanied minors should not be seated in first class to prevent inconveniencing other travelers." Rebecca lifted an eyebrow, interrupting her with calm but unyielding firmness. "How curious," she said. "I've flown Mesa for years and have never heard of a rule barring minors from first class. Stranger still that this supposed policy only applies to my daughter today." Her tone was gentle, yet razor, sharp, and her gaze bore straight into Catherine's conscience, allowing no room for vague excuses. Catherine swallowed hard under the weight of that gaze, but clung to her last lifeline. "Ms. Johnson, with all due respect, we were simply following company procedure. There was no personal malice intended toward your daughter." Rebecca stepped forward, closing the distance and tightening her hold on the conversation. Her voice was soft, yet unmistakably firm. "If you truly meant no harm, why did you initially refuse to even check Maya's ticket? Why didn't you verify the facts with your superiors? Those actions reveal that this wasn't about policy. It was your own personal bias, Miss Ward." Catherine's face went ashen, her lips quivering, but no words emerged. For the first time, she felt the full force of her own prejudice laid bare. Jason Mitchell tried to interject, his tone overly conciliatory. "Miss Johnson, I believe this is simply a regrettable misunderstanding. Catherine was only trying to do her job. I'm sure she never intended any offense or discrimination." Rebecca cut him off instantly, her icy stare silencing him mid-sentence. Each word she spoke carried weight. "Mr. Mitchell, there's the problem. When Catherine willfully ignored clear evidence, refused to verify the facts, and forced my daughter from her proper seat, and you stood by instead of seeking the truth, that is complicity and prejudice, whether intentional or not." She paused, letting that land like a gavel. Her eyes were deeper and more commanding than before. Prejudice doesn't only live in overt acts, it hides in silence, in baseless rationalizations, and in the willful avoidance of responsibility. Jason bowed his head, throat tightening, unable to meet Rebecca's unrelenting gaze. He realized he had become part of the very injustice he denied. A heavy, unprecedented silence gripped the cabin. No passenger dared to breathe loudly or stir. All eyes were fixed on Rebecca, who stood serene yet formidable. The tension was stretched to its limit. Then, with her full composure restored, Rebecca turned to Maya and softened her voice with pride and affection. "Maya, you did exactly what I taught you. Today, you stood not only for yourself, but for everyone who's ever faced injustice." Maya's eyes shone with emotion. She took a steadying breath, squared her shoulders, and her dignity shone brighter than ever. Rebecca then addressed Catherine and Jason one final time, her tone resolute and uncompromising. "This is no longer merely about individual errors. It is a clear manifestation of a societal ill we often refuse to acknowledge: racial prejudice. And it is precisely that refusal that allows it to fester and grow." Catherine lowered her gaze, shoulders trembling, shame evident. Jason attempted to avoid Rebecca's piercing stare, but knew there was nowhere left to hide. Neither could excuse their actions. In that moment, the cabin became a courtroom, every passenger hanging on Rebecca's words, reflecting on their weight. Her speech was a clarion call to conscience. Rebecca stepped to Maya's side, gently placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her eyes full of love and pride. Maya looked up, her confidence in self-respect fully restored. Finally, Rebecca spoke once more, her voice soft yet strong enough for every ear. "I hope everyone here understands that change cannot happen if we remain silent in the face of injustice. Silence is complicity, and complicity nurtures the cruel prejudices that plague us." She swept her gaze across the cabin, resolve and hope shining in her eyes. "I believe that from this day forward, each of us will choose to speak up, because that is how we build a fairer, more humane society." Catherine and Jason stood motionless, heads bowed, utterly defeated by the very truths they had tried to conceal. No passenger spoke to contradict. All were moved by the powerful message Rebecca delivered. In that moment, the curtain of prejudice was torn away, revealing a painful but necessary truth, one no one on that flight would ever forget. Rebecca's words echoed through the cabin like a tolling bell, leaving a profound, thoughtful silence in their wake. Catherine and Jason stood frozen, their faces drained of color, eyes vacant as if they could not believe the gravity of what was unfolding. Gently, but with unshakable resolve, Rebecca turned to the two senior airline staff standing by the door. Her voice, measured yet laden with authority, carried across the hushed cabin. "I want to make one thing absolutely clear. This flight cannot depart with the current crew. Today's events have shown that these two are no longer fit to serve our passengers." Catherine jerked in shock, eyes wide in disbelief. Jason looked as though he'd just awoken from a nightmare, panic etched on his face, arms hanging limply at his sides, powerless to respond. Never in their careers had they imagined so public a disgrace. Catherine's voice trembled as she clung to her last shred of authority. "Ms. Johnson, we sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding, but is this request not a little extreme? We can assure you it won't happen again." Rebecca cut her off softly but sharply. "A misunderstanding, Miss Ward? This was not a misunderstanding but a deliberate act rooted in clear racial bias. I cannot accept a crew that has openly displayed discrimination, continuing to serve on this flight. My decision is final." Her gaze shifted to Jason, her tone growing colder still. "Mr. Mitchell, as a pilot, you should uphold fairness, impartiality, and safety for every passenger. Yet your actions today demonstrate you failed to fulfill that basic duty. Therefore, you, too, are unfit to remain on this flight." Jason opened his mouth but could not speak, trapped by shame and despair, realizing there was no defense left. The cabin's atmosphere turned electric with tension. Every passenger held their breath, riveted by Rebecca's verdict. No one dared protest or look away. All eyes silently affirmed that her decision was just. Rebecca addressed the senior staff behind her, her voice crystal, clear and resolute. "I request that Mesa Airlines immediately dispatch replacement crew to ensure this flight can depart safely and fairly. As long as these two remain aboard, neither my daughter nor I, and certainly no one else here, will feel at ease." The two executives nodded rapidly and pulled out their phones, placing urgent calls. They understood this incident threatened the airline's entire reputation. Rebecca Johnson's demand could not be ignored. Turning back to Catherine and Jason one final time, Rebecca's tone softened just slightly, yet remained powerful. "I hope you both understand why I've taken this step. This is not just about my daughter. It's about protecting the dignity and fairness owed to every passenger who has ever faced injustice." Catherine lowered her head, tears of shame and bitterness welling in her eyes. Jason stood beside her, hands trembling, grasping that his career and reputation might be irrevocably damaged. A deep, meaningful silence enveloped the cabin. The passengers remained still, but their silence was no longer avoidance. It was a unanimous show of support for Rebecca's decision. From the rear of the cabin, Maya looked at her mother with pride and gratitude. She knew her mother had done something profoundly important, not only defending her, but championing justice for all who had suffered discrimination. Minutes later, the two senior staff approached Catherine and Jason with polite firmness. "By order of airline leadership, you are to disembark immediately. Replacement crew are on their way." Catherine swallowed hard, despair etched on her face. She could not utter another word. Jason followed in silent defeat, shame pooling in his eyes. Together, they left the cabin in complete silence. Rebecca stood her ground, calm and authoritative, watching their backs as they departed. This was not a personal victory. It was justice prevailing over prejudice and wrongdoing. Now, with a fresh crew en route, the flight was ready for takeoff. Yet more important than the journey ahead, this would be the flight every passenger remembered, when justice and human dignity were defended with unwavering strength. The slow, heavy footsteps of Catherine and Jason as they exited the plane marked the end of a tense, breath-stealing moment. But that moment also turned the page on a new chapter, one of restored justice, respect, and human dignity. Barely minutes later, firm, steady footsteps sounded at the cabin door. Two new crew members arrived, stepping in with courteous professionalism, careful not to disturb the now stabilizing atmosphere. They offered polite nods to Rebecca, their eyes reflecting genuine respect for the woman who had so fiercely defended fairness. Rebecca returned their nod with quiet authority. Then she turned and walked slowly toward the back of the cabin, where Maya was waiting. Her gaze softened more than ever, a tenderness reserved only for her little girl. Maya's eyes shone with pride and gratitude, clearly understanding the significance of this moment. "Maya," Rebecca called gently, her voice warm yet resolute. "It's time to return to your rightful seat." Maya rose deliberately, not rushed, her eyes bright with confidence. She walked with perfect posture, chin held high, each step measured and poised, a remarkable display of maturity for her age. Her steady stride wasn't merely movement, it symbolized resilience, dignity, and courage. All the passengers watched Maya closely. With every step, she seemed to dispel the lingering remnants of prejudice and injustice. They could see the calm determination on her face, as though she'd just emerged victorious from the toughest battle of her life. When Maya passed row 2, Mrs. Linda Rivera offered a gentle, admiring smile and nod. George Whitmore followed suit, nodding with both respect and remorse, as if acknowledging his own earlier silence and fully standing with Maya now. Finally, Maya reached her original seat, first class, 2A. Rebecca lovingly adjusted her daughter's seatbelt with a tender gesture. She looked into Maya's eyes with boundless pride. Today, you didn't just prove your own worth. You stood up for so many others, too. I couldn't be prouder of you. At that moment, soft applause rose from the back of the cabin. Then more and more, gradually spreading throughout. The gentle clapping was neither loud nor theatrical, but it rang out with honest, heartfelt support for Maya and Rebecca, and as a clear message to anyone still harboring unjust biases. Those quiet rounds of applause seemed to dissolve the earlier tension, replacing it with warmth, solidarity, and renewed hope for fairness in our world. Maya smiled, her eyes shining. She understood that the applause wasn't just for her personally, but for the courage to speak out, for justice and what is right. Rebecca turned to the passengers, giving a gracious nod of thanks. Her voice rang out, sincere and clear. I am profoundly grateful for your understanding and bravery. What happened today isn't merely a personal victory. It's a victory for fairness, human dignity, and for all of us who believe in a better society. The passengers returned her gaze with evident respect. Some nodded gently. Others offered warm smiles, as though wholeheartedly agreeing with her words. No one needed to speak. They all understood the message Rebecca had conveyed. Meanwhile, Maya sat quietly in first class, relief and pride filling her heart. She had faced a challenge many adults would struggle to overcome, and she had triumphed, fueled by resilience, self-respect, and her mother's unwavering love. Outside the window, the gray clouds slowly parted, revealing gentle rays of light, a promise of a brighter journey ahead. This flight was now ready to depart, and it would carry its passengers not just to their destination, but on a meaningful journey toward respect, justice, and compassion for every person on board. The soft applause had just died away, leaving a warm, reflective hush in the cabin. Rebecca scanned the rows of seats and saw that the passengers' gazes were no longer merely curious. They carried empathy and admiration. She realized that this moment was about more than defending her daughter. It was a chance to share a far more meaningful message with everyone on board. Stepping into the aisle of first class, Rebecca stood tall and poised, her presence naturally commanding. Her eyes, sincere and penetrating, seemed to reach into each person's heart. When she spoke, her voice was calm yet authoritative. No need to raise its volume, for the honesty and strength in her words demanded everyone's full attention. Ladies and gentlemen, she began gently but seriously, her steady voice speaking like a heartfelt confession. We've just experienced an incident that I'm sure none of us wanted, but I believe it also gives us an opportunity to reflect deeply on something our society often overlooks: prejudice. She paused, her gaze soft as it passed over the faces of the passengers before she continued. Prejudice doesn't always reveal itself in overt hostility or direct insults. Sometimes it hides in our subconscious, in thoughts that seem harmless, in decisions that feel routine. Yet, those very biases, whether intentional or not, cause deep harm to countless people in our community. Glancing toward Maya, who sat quietly in first class, composed but proud, Rebecca turned back to the passengers. Her voice grew stronger, each word carefully chosen and laden with power. What's most troubling isn't those who blatantly show prejudice, but the silence of those who witness it. We often think that staying silent keeps us out of trouble, but let me tell you this: silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Her words rang out clearly and powerfully, resonating in every passenger's mind. The cabin fell into an absolute but far more thoughtful stillness, no longer awkward or tense, but filled with awareness, flexion, and shared empathy for her message. Her pace slowed, her tone gentler yet still strong. I know that each of us here has, at least once, remained silent in the face of injustice, small or large. I have been guilty of that myself, but today, standing before you and before my daughter, I realize that if we want a better society, the first step is to break that silence. She turned to George Whitmore, the elderly gentleman who had bravely confessed his own silence. He caught her eye and gave a grateful nod. Rebecca continued, her voice heartfelt. I deeply appreciate the courage of Mr. Whitmore and Ms. Rivera today. Their willingness to speak up has helped us all see the truth and has empowered many others not to stay silent in the face of injustice. She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in, then spoke again, firmly and convincingly. Remember, every time we stay silent in the face of wrongdoing, we unknowingly allow it to persist and grow. Only when we dare to speak up, to stand with justice, no matter how small the act, can we truly change our society. As her final words lingered, the passengers remained still, their eyes reflecting deep emotion and thought. Some bowed their heads, as if questioning their own past silences. Others nodded, determination shining in their eyes, as if they'd found a renewed purpose to live more justly. Rebecca quietly returned to Maya's side and gently took her daughter's hand. Maya looked up, pride and gratitude shining in her eyes. She understood that her mother's words applied not only to her, but to everyone who has ever faced injustice and found themselves unable or afraid to speak. Outside the window, the late afternoon light filtered through the clouds, carrying the day's last warmth. In that moment, no one spoke again, for everyone knew that Rebecca's words needed no further comment. They stood firmly on their own in each person's heart. The flight had not yet departed, but in the hearts of every passenger, a new journey had already begun, toward change, toward justice, and toward breaking the silence to build a fairer, more compassionate society. That, Rebecca Johnson understood, was the greatest gift she could give them today. As soon as Rebecca's words ended, their echoes still seemed to hang in the cabin, leaving every passenger with a profound awakening. Once she was sure Maya was settled safely in her seat, Rebecca offered another gentle nod of thanks to the travelers, then quietly stepped out to speak with the airline's management. The instant she left, the cabin remained silent, but this silence had shifted from tense to one of thoughtful emotion. At that moment, Ms. Linda Rivera, the Latina woman who had bravely spoken up against the injustice, reached inside her coat pocket and withdrew a small slip of paper. She walked slowly toward Maya, her eyes soft and kind, yet brimming with unspoken feeling. When she reached her, she gently placed a hand on Maya's shoulder and handed her the note, her voice warm and sincere. I want you to keep this. Thank you for teaching us adults the most precious lesson we sometimes forget: courage. Maya accepted the paper, a comforting warmth spreading from the touch of this kindly stranger. She carefully unfolded it and read the few words written there. Those simple lines sank deeply into her heart, bringing relief and profound gratitude. Looking up, she offered Linda a gentle smile and spoke in a soft, earnest tone. "Thank you so much for speaking up for me today. I believe you're very brave, too." Linda shook her head softly, tears glistening in her eyes, her voice catching but resolute. "You are the bravest person here today, Maya. I only wish that if I ever face something like this again, I will be strong enough to speak out right away, just like you did." Just then, Mr. George Whitmore, the elderly gentleman with silver hair who had confessed to his own silence, slowly rose from his seat. He approached Maya with careful steps, each movement weighed down by regret. When he stood before her, he bent down so they were eye to eye, his gaze gentle and honest, yet full of remorse. His voice trembled with emotion as he spoke. "Maya, I want to offer you my most heartfelt apology. Today, I made a grave mistake by remaining silent instead of defending you from the start. I don't know if this apology can ever undo the hurt you felt, but I promise that from now on, I will never stay silent in the face of wrongdoing again." George Whitmore's humble, sincere admission moved not only Maya, but every passenger nearby. They all recognized the courage it took for him to speak so honestly. Maya met his eyes, her own reflecting empathy, forgiveness, and a maturity rare in someone of just 11 years. She replied gently, "You don't have to blame yourself, Mr. Whitmore. What matters is that you stood up and admitted your mistake. I think that's true courage." Her words were like a gentle breeze that touched every heart in the cabin. The compassion and strength in her voice inspired admiration and deep emotion among all who listened. Their gazes turned to Maya, filled with respect and gratitude for the priceless lesson she had given them. George Whitmore straightened slowly, nodded tenderly, tears shining in his eyes. His voice quivered but remained sincere. "Thank you, Maya. Not only have you forgiven me, but you've taught me things I thought I already knew. I will never forget what you said today." He placed a warm hand on her shoulder before returning to his seat, his spirit lighter yet contemplative. Once more, the cabin fell silent, but this time it was the silence of respect and introspection. Every passenger understood that today's events were more than just the story of a young girl treated unfairly. It was a moment that awakened their consciences and reminded them that anyone can choose to stand up against injustice and prejudice. Maya leaned back into her seat, her heart as light as a cloud, filled with faith and hope for a brighter tomorrow. She realized that today she had not only defended her own dignity, but also helped shift the perspectives of the adults around her. And that, more than anything, made her truly proud. Maya's remarkable growth and compassion didn't end the moment the plane landed. They continued to resonate powerfully afterward. What happened that day left an indelible mark on every passenger, far beyond a simple personal incident. It was the beginning of a domino effect that shook the very foundations of Mesa Airlines management and customer service. Just days later, the story broke across news outlets and social media. Images and accounts of brave young Maya, of the powerful yet deeply humane Rebecca Johnson, and of sincere apologies from passengers like Linda Rivera and George Whitmore spread rapidly across platforms worldwide. Mesa Airlines leadership recognized that this was more than a minor PR issue. They immediately convened an emergency meeting, aware that now was not the time to cover up mistakes or deflect blame, but to confront the problem at its root. The result was an unprecedented reform initiative called the Maya Protocol. The Maya Protocol isn't merely another training program. It's a comprehensive overhaul of how airline staff perceive and respond to discriminatory behavior or racial bias. All Mesa Airlines employees, from pilots and flight attendants to ground personnel, are required to attend workshops on awareness and appropriate action when faced with prejudice or injustice. Crucially, the protocol empowers employees to speak up immediately rather than remain silent. This initiative quickly garnered widespread attention and support, even from other carriers. Within weeks, industry giants like Delta, JetBlue, and United publicly announced their own similar commitments. From a single incident on Flight 227, a powerful movement against bias and racism rippled through the aviation sector, sparking lasting, unprecedented change. Meanwhile, those responsible, Catherine Ward and Jason Mitchell, faced serious consequences. Following a thorough, impartial internal investigation, Catherine was terminated from Mesa Airlines. She had to confront the painful reality that her career, built over decades, had crumbled in a moment of prejudice and disrespect. Yet the most remarkable outcome wasn't Catherine's dismissal, but her profound personal awakening. Days after losing her job, she penned the most heartfelt apology letter she could to Maya. When Maya received the letter, she sat quietly, carefully opened the envelope, and read every word. Catherine's handwriting was deliberate and sincere. Dear Maya, I know that these words alone cannot erase the hurt I caused you. I have spent hours reflecting on what I did that day and realized that my actions stemmed from ignorance and deep-seated prejudice I never recognized in myself. You forced me to see it in the most painful yet undeniable way. Thank you, Maya, for giving me the chance to face my mistakes and change. I promise from now on to live with greater understanding and never let bias guide my actions again. With my deepest apologies and admiration for your courage, Catherine Ward. Finishing the letter, Maya felt an unexpected lightness in her heart. She understood how much humility and self-reflection it must have taken for Catherine to write those words. Rather than anger or resentment, Maya gently folded the note and tucked it into a small pocket of her backpack, a reminder of forgiveness and compassion. Rebecca, seeing her daughter cherish the letter, smiled with pride. She knew Maya had taught the adults around her not only about courage, but also about the power of empathy and acceptance, the very foundation of a better society. In the days that followed, the story of Flight 227 and its young heroine spread well beyond American borders, becoming a global symbol of positive change. Maya, once a quiet 11-year-old in first class, had become an icon in the fight against prejudice and injustice. But the greatest lesson for Maya wasn't the fame or attention she received. It was the realization that anyone, no matter how small or young, can spark positive change by standing up and speaking out. She would always be grateful for that challenging, tearful day because it taught her life's greatest lesson, the power of courage, justice, and kindness. Now, Maya is ready to continue her journey with a strong heart and unwavering belief in a better world, one she knows she will help shape because she will never remain silent again. The echoes of that day's events have since faded into memory, but the lessons it taught us will never wane. A few months later, on a completely different flight, Rebecca and Maya once again stepped into the cabin. The atmosphere was transformed. Rarely had they felt such calm and ease, as though all previous storms had finally passed, giving way to a deep, peaceful serenity. No sooner had they appeared by the cabin door than 2 flight attendants greeted them with warm, radiant smiles. Their eyes shone with genuine respect, a far cry from the suspicion and prejudice Maya once endured. There was no hesitation, only heartfelt welcomes, sincere smiles, and gestures of honor. Welcome aboard, Ms. Johnson and Maya. It's our pleasure to have you with us today, said a young attendant, her tone glowing with admiration for Maya. Rebecca returned her smile graciously, sensing that this change was not mere lip service but a genuine shift from within. Clearly, the Maya protocol Mesa Airlines had implemented was reshaping attitudes and awareness throughout their staff. Maya, now accustomed to polite attention, remained calm and humble. She walked into the cabin with natural confidence, shoulders back and chin up, yet her eyes stayed modest and appreciative of everyone around her. She understood that the respect she received today wasn't about fame or reputation, but about the true courage of standing up to injustice. As they made their way to their seats, Rebecca discreetly took in the cabin's feel. No more doubtful glances, no more cold words laced with bias. Instead, she saw kind expressions and attentive gestures, as though every crew member understood the deep responsibility they bore to uphold fairness and human dignity. Rebecca gently sat beside Maya and looked at her daughter with pride and tenderness. Maya settled comfortably into her seat, her clear eyes drifting to the window as if lost in thought, a soft smile playing on her lips. Leaning toward her, Rebecca whispered warmly, yet profoundly, "Do you see, Maya? We don't always have to shout to change the world. Sometimes all it takes is standing tall and speaking up at just the right moment." Maya turned to her mother, her gaze affectionate and understanding of the depths of those words. "Yes, Mom," she replied, softly but firmly. "I understand. Sometimes the best thing we can do is hold our ground and never be afraid to speak out." Rebecca smiled, resting her hand gently on Maya's shoulder. Between them was a deep, unspoken understanding. No further explanation was needed. The trials of the past months, though exhausting at times, had taught them the greatest lesson: that courage, steadiness, and the power to change the world can come simply from quiet strength and integrity. Suddenly, a warm voice rang out from the next row. Maya turned to see a distinguished-looking businessman offering a sincere smile. "Pardon the interruption," he said, "but I just wanted to say that what you two have done has truly reshaped how the aviation industry treats its passengers. I admire your courage." Rebecca and Maya both nodded in gratitude, their eyes filled with appreciation. Though they had heard words of thanks many times since that day, each expression of gratitude reminded them of the profound value and impact of their experience. The plane began to taxi toward the runway, preparing for takeoff in a newfound calm. Maya looked out the window, her heart as light as the clouds drifting outside. She realized that today's journey was not just a trip. It was a living testament to a new standard of respect and fairness, a standard she and her mother had helped establish. As the aircraft gently lifted off the ground, the wide sky spread out before them. Maya felt a surge of hope. Even though she was small in this vast world, she knew that as long as people held on to their beliefs, their courage, and their dignity, each of them could spark positive change. And just as her mother had whispered, you don't always have to shout to change the world. By standing tall, holding firm to your principles, and speaking up at the right moment, anyone can make a real difference. The plane soared into the clouds, leaving behind the old world where prejudice once stood as an invisible barrier, and heading toward a new horizon where dignity, courage, and respect would define every journey. Maya and Rebecca Johnson's fight for justice was more than a story of bravery. It was a call to action for us all. Prejudice and injustice survive only in our silence, but when we dare to stand up and speak out, even once, we can set in motion profound, lasting change. What about you? If you found yourself in Maya's place, would you have the courage to speak up against injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this message resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up, share to spread the courage, and subscribe so you won't miss our next inspiring stories. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.